if you could share or let Jack get controls there, and you already had done it. So welcome to everybody, all of our members, new members included, and any guests that might have popped on. I didn't see any names that I didn't recognize necessarily. Tonight's agenda is we'll go through some announcements here like always. We'll get into our demonstration tonight. Is going to be a discussion of tips and tricks. We're going to try to, first of all, Sue Bergstrom, who everybody had sent their information to, is going to announce the individual names and bring up the information that they've sent her. And then that individual will unmute themselves and talk about their tip or trick, and hopefully keep it to a 5 to 10 minute period. And then we'll go to the next person, and we'll continue that for about an hour and maybe a little bit over an hour, depending on how everything's going. At which time I'll just call an end to that. And then Kevin's going to do a drawing for the ones that did get in and had a chance to participate and in the demonstration or discussion. He will have a drawing for a couple of coupons for which location. It's wood and not Woodcraft. Anyway,
Craft Supply, Chris. Craft Supply. Two $10 coupons to Craft Supply.
So you got an opportunity to get a little bit out of your participation tonight. We'll move on after that and get into the challenge project, which is multi-axis turning based on Mike's presentation last month of the wood sea urchin project. And then we'll wrap up with the show and tell. So getting on to it, I'll just get right into the announcements. Obviously, Open Shop has continued in March. The new difference is we're going to drop the sign up genius because we've the city's kind of relaxed some of those requirements. But we do want to stress that now more than even more than before, we'd like you to be diligent about signing up on the sign up sheet on the door so that we can, if we need to, we can do some contact tracing or at least know who was in the shop at a given time. We had a shop cleanup this last Saturday, and thank you all members that helped out, because the shop when I left looked fantastic. You can see from the picture there, I don't know the last time I saw so little dust in the air or on the walls or anywhere. As always, when you're in the shop, just keep it clean around what you've been using and the dust and things that you've created there. Please clean up after yourself. And if you see any maintenance issues, especially if there's a maintenance issue that is a safety concern, please let the board know so that we can address it or at least report it to whomever can take care of that problem. Again, remember to check out the Etsy site, Hand Turn KC. There's several items. I think we're over 25 items now, or right in that area, of items that have been donated to the club for sale. There's also links to some of the people that have it in their own Etsy site from our club that you can get to their site through the Etsy. You can donate a turned item to support the club. Just let Kevin know that you'd like to, and between Kevin and Ann Molina, we'll get it onto the Etsy site. Thanks to all those who have donated. We've got quite a few members that have donated items so far, and a big thanks to Ann Molina once again for managing the site to date. As everybody's probably seen that is a member of the AAW, there was an email that came out that said the symposium that was planned for July 2021 in Nebraska this year is going to end up being a virtual event again. We haven't talked about any like getting together to view or anything, but just wanted to make everybody aware that it will be a virtual event. And it sounded like the folks that attended the virtual event last year got a lot out of it and kind of liked the format. So it might be something you want to look into this year. We've got a plan to clean up and organize and do a better job of displaying the glass cases that are out there in the open shop area. Sean and the board will work together to get some things organized there and make it look a little bit better, and maybe present our club a little bit better to that side of the clubhouse. Oh, and then thanks to all the helpers. I don't know if any of you don't know, we had a pretty large sale last Saturday or 2 Saturdays ago, last Saturday, of flute wood that was provided to the Woodworkers Guild, who approached us because it was more useful to woodturners than it was to the woodworkers, and we presented it all, got it all out on tables, and had a big sale at $2 a pound. And by the end of the day, had sold over 3,000 pounds of the about 4,000 approximately pounds that they had on hand. Ultimately, what it did, we shared profits. We got a quarter of whatever the profits were, and by the end of the day, we'd made enough to about cover a month's rent for the clubhouse. So it was a nice event. Had a great turnout, had a lot of helpers, and really appreciated everybody that did take the time and come out and both purchase and help with the event. So thank you all. Let's see. Oh, before I get into the March silent auction, there was a couple of announcements that I didn't get on there. There will be another cleanup, but it's not until May 22nd. So we'll announce that as it gets closer. It'll be a 10 to noon cleanup. That seemed to work pretty good. We had good participation. And then just wanted to remind everybody that in June on the 19th, we'll have the annual picnic at Shawnee Mission Park. So those are some things down the line to look forward to. All right, Jack, I guess. Okay. The silent art auction piece for this month is a selection from the Bob and Betty Davis art collection, a natural edge bowl that Bob had turned a while back. It's Georgia cherry. And I think currently we have $100 bid on that. And we are accepting bids on that item through Friday of this week. Then our April silent art auction piece will be by our club vice president, Mike Thomas. It's a beautiful spalted cherry bowl that he calls half and half. And the bidding on that will start after Friday, after Bob's closes, and be open till, I gotta move my thing. Oops. Jack, what's it say? I can't see it on my screen. The bidding on Mike's will stay open until
it's open till Friday, April 16th.
Perfect, thank you. So everybody take a look at that. I think an email had went out. It even had more pictures of it. It is a gorgeous bowl. So thank you, Mike, for your donation and to the silent art auction. Okay, that got me through our announcements this month. And before we start our tips and tricks demonstration, let me see. Sue, are you here yet? Let's see.
Yes, I'm here. I'm still struggling through stuff.
Okay.
Microsoft decided to download updates in the midst of my trying to get pictures moved.
I can relate to that. No problem. We're going to have Effie pop in here and give us a little important safety information. Thanks, Effie, for again reminding us that safety in the shop should be first on your list.
Okay, so I'll share my screen. I prepared the 2 videos. I will stop my sharing because of the. I'll start it again. And no words are needed. So,
Boom.
so that was using a faceplate and mounting the wood properly. And this one,
Was anybody else wincing while they were watching that last one?
Oh, yeah.
so I want to talk about safety, but the words or images are speaking louder than.
Well, I've been filming these, trying to catch one of these breaking it. Tonight I wasn't filming and I blew one up. It broke my face shield. It hurt. Hit me right in the face. Right here. This is exactly why you wear face shields and safety glasses, because these things really do hurt, and they can hurt bad. So when one this big comes apart, it doesn't fly very good. It's lucky that piece stayed in there, because generally they fly out too. Well, there's the one I missed.
That's it.
Two important things. Chuck your things well, know that you got a good chuck, and always wear a face mask when you're doing those big items that have a potential to come apart. Actually, you never know when something's going to come apart. So any big item, you should be wearing a face shield and safety
A
glasses.
good face shield, not a crummy, cheap face shield.
Actually, even the crummy ones are better than nothing, I suppose, because it might keep your eyeball from getting hit. I don't know. But thanks, Effie, for putting those together. And without further ado, I'm going to have Sue take over the screen. And Sue, I am going to have you, or ask if you're capable, if you've got your download yet, that you just introduce the person in kind of the order that you received the information, and that person will take over the mic for a while and present their tip or trick. So Sue, I'm turning it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully we can share this screen. Okay, these are sorted for the most part by first name. So this is Anne's starting off. Is Anne with us?
Okay, I am here. I finally got a vacuum chuck. And so Mike Thomas has been helping me make the chucks. And so this one is a flat one that I've got. And it is made of MDF. Well, let's see. And then the next ones have are with PVC and closed cell foam. So I have 3 of them right now. This big one that is 11, and then one that is 4 inches and 5 inches. So Sue, if you could go to the next picture, I think there are 3 pictures of this. Mm-hmm. And on the back of them, then we glued a piece of walnut, I believe, on one of them, and then tapped it using Bill Paulo's tap. And the other one has an MDF piece glued on the back that was also tapped. And then I found a gas vacuum pump on Marketplace. And last night ordered the gauge. So this is all starting to come together. And what little I've used it, I love it. It's great. Okay. So that one is on the, let's see, that's on the 5-inch chuck. So that's my vacuum chuck.
And your
So-
kiln is here as well.
Okay, and then here's the other thing is not so much the crack, but when a bowl warps, how it warps up there. And so trying to get it back on the lathe and centered right so that you can true it up again. This was something that Mike also helped me with, but that we'd seen Glenn Lucas do. And so we put together a 16-inch bowl reversing plate. So if you go to the next picture, this is 16 inches across. The base of it is 1 inch. Let's see, it's plywood. And then on the top part there, that's another piece of inch plywood that's covered in vinyl. So basically just bring up your tailstock, put it on there and line it up. So even if it's not flat, it's held well enough that you can retrue it. And then on the back of that one, it has a tenon that's made out of hard maple and also tapped. So that's worked out really well also when something is warped. So that's it. Oh, that's a kiln. That one, we also have been working on trying to dry wood, and that's version number 1. Okay, and that's number 2. So I thought these were going to come as a separate part, but we were trying to dry wood in a kiln. So we started out with Kevin's dishwasher and took everything out, put in a heat source and tried to dry wood, and it worked great the first time. So we decided to upgrade and get a big upright freezer, took everything out of it. And so there's the freezer. Down at the bottom are vent holes that will slide open to allow the air to circulate. And then up at the top, there is the white piece up there is letting us know the humidity. And the other one is controlling a heat pad to keep the temperature regulated inside. So that one that's been going about 3 weeks now, and still trying to figure it out as we go. There might be one more picture then. Okay, so there's a close-up of the controls. And then that up on the top, there was a vent fan, but so far that the heating pad at the bottom is having trouble getting much above 90. So we're learning as we go. And there it is with all the bowls that are in there waiting to be dried. So that's it. Oh, and the next to that though is also a freezer. And see, we learned about the kiln from Don Frank, and he was telling us about how he was doing it, and then watching other videos is how we came up with this. And then something else that Don does is when he's working on a piece and he doesn't get to finish it and it's green, he puts it in the freezer and then just pulls it back out. And that way it keeps it from cracking until he can get back to working with it. So he will store stuff in his freezer and then put it into the kiln to dry it out. So he'll build up stuff until he's got enough to fill the kiln. That's all.
Anne?
Yeah.
You said you used Kevin's washing or dishwasher?
Yes.
Yeah. Did he know you had gotten it?
Yeah, he did. But you know what? We're not using that one anymore. So if anyone would like to have that and try it yourself, it's available. Come get it. And if you've got any questions on the technical part and everything, talk to Mike, because he knows all of that. It just happens to be in my basement because I have more space. That's all.
Okay, next
Thanks,
is
Ann.
Daniel Dubois.
So you can expand the picture of the right bottom arrows there, full screen, yeah.
So this is a document, a photo I got from a woodturner friend out of Canada named Ruby Claire. She's a professional woodturner. It's been doing it for a long time, but this is something that she always had above her lathe and has been really helpful for me as a newer woodturner to always try and remember which is the best direction to cut in the type of bowl, be it side grain or end grain, so that I'm not fighting against the grain. So this is just something that I use to help me in my wood turning journey to get better. And I thought I would share that in case anybody wanted something like this to have access to, or you were maybe showing somebody something new or introducing somebody to wood turning, that this is something they could use as their guide as they're going through this too.
Valuable.
Well, the
Thanks,
trouble with
Dan.
doing full screen is that I can no longer see the file name.
Can't
This
see
is
the
Dave
file.
Stalling.
Hey, are we on? Okay. One of the things I found by getting a larger lathe was that the pieces weigh more. And so I decided I should take the lesson from a friend of my brother's who put a winch on overhead. So this is the pieces that you need to do that, except for the overhead track. And the electric winch is a off-the-shelf item. Got that from Harbor Freight. I think it's less than $100. But what you don't get are the track wheels and the bolt that you see on the right side of that. So I've just formed two steel saddles, so to speak, and drilled in a hole through the center of the track wheels, and that's the basis for the overhead winch. Now the pieces that have the bolts down below are how I attached it to the 2x12s in the ceiling of my garage. And it's a sheetrock covered garage top, but those angles are what were welded to the track, and the brackets are what I drilled holes through the joist and put bolts, carriage bolts through all of those holes, and it measured the same distance from the top down. So they're all hanging about the same height, and you can actually adjust the height by you're screwing on the bolts. And so after I got this installed in the attic, then I could, put the track up and clamp it and weld it. And the next picture should show what it looks like in use. Oops.
How about that one?
There. Okay, so there's the track hanging from the ceiling about a foot down, and you'll see the controls hang down and the winch cable and the safety straps that you use for tying stuff in your pickup or whatever make a really great way to get things around. And so you can move lathe parts and just save a lot of weight. Just be sure you got it strapped good. And but that was my $100 investment that I feel really helps, because you do things that otherwise you got to have at least one person to help you with. So I've handled 80-pound, 100-pound burls and no problem at all with it. It has a lift capacity of 800 pounds, and my best calculations on the ceiling joist is 2,000 pounds. So I think it's adequate. All right.
Dave,
Uh-huh.
what kind of track is that?
It's a barn door garage track. Get an 8-foot or 10-foot piece. If you're really smart, you'd run it all over your garage and get it where you get it to the door. But I I just hung one piece and centered over your lathe with about a 4-foot excess out, so you can get, things in front of the lathe and get them ready to mount.
Thanks. I need one of those.
I just had to throw this that laser in because I think it's my best buy of the year. 85 bucks spent, and I really like. I've done several things. It just takes a little bit of ingenuity to hold it up over the top of your box, and then that's just my go at a logo, so to speak. And then there's one. That's the end of it, I think. Oh, and then last but not least, the dust catcher that I have is a DC 1100 jet. And the problem I encountered was that the bag was getting old and we were leaking a lot of fine dust around the edges and so forth. So I decided to update it, and I looked into these filters that you get that are 1 or 2 micron filters. And the problem is they're 20-inch diameter, and my dust catcher is old enough that it's 18 inches. So I turned this 1-inch thick ring on the outboard side of my lathe and then screwed it in with 4 screws. And that gave me a 20-inch base. And then while I was in that, I created a cone, which I had read enough about. The new jets have a vortex cone. And what the idea is that keeps most of the dust from going up to the filter. And then the canister has to be, set down on top of it. And the other thing I did is to put 3 screws through this ring into the base of the new filter so that it's held down to seal it. It had a great gasket in there to keep the dust from leaking at that gap or at the seam. And then the assembled pictures, it's actually there and working, and I'm real happy with it. The airflow is up at least 50% on the vacuum. That's a $350 upgrade, but it's still better than buying a new a dust catcher. So I think it's pretty good.
David, where is the dust collector located? Near your lathe?
It's about 4 feet away with a 6-inch flexible hose going over to a bracket I welded up that has split off the, you can just barely see that 6-inch tube there on the bottom. Anyway, so I just run that 6-inch tube over close to the lathe. I've got a 6-inch adapter to the 4-inch takeoffs that I welded and screwed to the wall. So,
and how is the noise? Do you run it all the time?
Yeah, whenever I'm turning, I run it. It's not bad. It's a lot lower actually than it was before with the older one. So this is quieter. I don't have any idea what the CFM is on it. I need to find that out, but I bet you it's 125 or 150.
That's great.
So it is, an update because it was older and we don't, follow along necessarily with what the new and best things are. And this was a cheap upgrade, but that Vortex edition is a big deal. So if you've got a dust catcher that doesn't have a Vortex in it, you might want to read up on that. Pretty neat. It's about a 16-inch cone, 5 inches high, and it just hangs under the place where the air goes round and round. And you can see it swirling in the bag. That kit came with a clear plastic waste catcher, which I had put in, but you had to modify the ring that holds the bag in place, and I hadn't done that when I took this picture. Okay.
Good.
This is Ed Jasek.
Yeah, this is my idea. I came up with this. I had bought when I was doing flat work, I had bought the screw thing for it. It's kind of like a vise. And so I use if you notice the little one, the adapter, it's the way I used to clamp my segmented pieces together. The end of it goes down into my faceplate, and then the top end has got a recess the same size as the diameter of the end of that screw. And this way I can clamp it on there, and I bought some, one guy used mouse pads. Well, you can't buy a 12-inch square mouse pad that I found. So I got this foam from Walmart, and I've got 3 or 4 layers. That way it gives it, if there's a little bit of discrepancy in the thicknesses, it will take up that and you'll get a good tight joint. And if you want to go to the next picture. And then I saw online where a guy used, so to line up my pieces so that they don't move around when I glue them, I hot glue these little pieces around on 4 quadrants. And that way, when I put the glue on and try and clamp it, it doesn't shift around on me.
Ooh.
This is Jerry James.
Okay, I think you can hear me now. Well, this is an idea that I use in my shop from a safety perspective. I'll tie into what Effie had earlier on those natural edge bowls. And my solution is chalk. Okay, it's a strange solution, but when I'm turning a natural edge or a wing bowl, I find it very difficult at times to see that edge, and it's very easy to hit a finger and knuckle and get hurt. And I use chalk on the very edges. It's very easy to see when your lathe is spinning up. And for me, it's just a safety issue, and it protects my fingers and knuckles. So I know I've tried other means of paper underneath to be able to see, but for me, this was my easiest way of seeing those edges as the lathe is spinning and protect myself. So that's my safety tip.
That's cool.
Where do you put the chalk?
On the edge of the wood that's spinning. So the corners of that wing bowl, the edges of that live edge, just mark on it, just like you're kids marking on a sidewalk. You're putting chalk on the very outer edge of the piece so that as it's spinning, you're seeing that light color go by versus the color of the wood. And I just find that much easier to identify when it's spinning and protect your fingers.
Do you have trouble getting the chalk off after you're done?
No, none whatsoever. It just brushes off. And another place that I use chalk is if I'm, let's say, doing that last final cut on the inside of one of these pieces, and you have a little high ridge. I can feel that high ridge with my fingers, but it may not be able to find it when the lathe is spinning. I'll actually mark that little area on the inside. Then when I turn the lathe on, it's very easy to spot that area that I need to just turn a little bit more wood off of to even up the finish.
That's good.
Nice tip.
Thank you. That's my one and only tip.
This is Mark Inman.
Yeah, this is a similar contraption like Ed has. It's for segmenting rings together, or gluing segmenting rings together. This is the top is 16 2x4s on end. I use as like a clamp, and then if you want to overkill it, I put 4 pipe clamps on it as well that you can clamp a ton of pressure on it. Underneath is a yard sprinkler. A 10-inch yard sprinkler that goes up through the center, and then in the plastic piece is a Longworth chuck kind of device, and it has little white pegs that you can center your ring precisely in the center of your faceplate. It works real good. I've used it on a couple of projects already, so yeah, it does somewhat pretty good. Above it, I have a series of pulleys, because the top is rather heavy, and if you're working with one hand, you couldn't lift it up with one hand. So I have a series of pulleys. If you can see the little steel strings there, that I have it, and I can pull it up with one hand, no problem at all. So yeah, it's not in the shop. So it's out of the shop, but I use it to glue up rings that I've already glued together.
Yeah, this is Mike Thomas.
Oh, okay. This is a quick and dirty, but for those of you who buy sheets of sandpaper and need to rip them, instead of dulling your scissors, what you can do with this is just a piece of flooring, or you can use plywood or anything, and an old hacksaw blade, and then just a scrap piece of wood that I had there, which you registered the edge of the paper on. But I have, you put it according to the outline of number 1, you rip it in half, put those together, put it in position 2, rip that, and then you got 4 quarters, and then you can just go on down with it. But just quick and easy, and it doesn't, dull your scissors or anything. And I found it helpful, saves time. Okay. This is something, again, really simple, but for those of you who like to set your tools on your lathe bed or whatever, that, just another work surface, this is really, really easy. It's just a piece of particle board, and I have a cleat that goes through between the ways, and then on the bottom of the ways, you just slide it on, slide it off. So you need to move your tailstock, you just slide it along, and like I said, what I do is I slide that off and set it down the floor when I'm putting the tailstock on or off or whatever, and just sliding it back on. It takes a ton of weight. I put a lot of weight on it, but I've had that for about, gosh, 8 or 9 years, and I use it like every day. So just something, if you might have thought of doing it, I would encourage you to, if you think it might be useful for you, do it.
Hey, Mike, Jerry James here. I have something similar to that I use on my lathe, but I've added little ledges on each end of it, because the first I had tools roll off of it, because I put my chisels on there, my gouges on there when I'm turning, and that just prevents tools from rolling off the edge.
That's good. What I did to solve that problem was I just take my tools of a wooden handle over to my belt sander and just stand a little flat in them so that they roll off. That's worked well for me. And then, the metal handled tools like the Thompson tools and stuff have flats on them so that they won't roll. But this way it's a lot easier to clean and everything too, and you don't get anything caught on the lip. But that's why I didn't do that.
Okay.
Good. Next.
This is Kevin Neely.
These are some calipers. About 10 years ago, I saw in an ad from Australia, this guy had invented calipers. You see where the scales are on the calipers? The scales are at the very end. So a lot of calipers, if they have scales, they have it by the handle. And these calipers are so deep that if the caliper is measuring something that's a 1/4 inch, a lot of bowls have 1/4 inch wall thicknesses. Well, the scale, if it's at the handle, that 1/4 inch would look more like a 1/16 of an inch. Well, the way these scales are set up, the gap that you're measuring, the scale is exactly that size. It makes the caliper a little complicated, but it really works well. I like to, when I'm turning something, the last little bit is what I need to caliper. And I like sliding the caliper in and then reading it as I'm pulling it out, and get a good measure, find if there's any high spots or thin spots or thick spots, and I get all those spots out. But it was kind of fun making calipers. I got the wood at Woodcraft. It's that 1/8 inch apple ply, and it doesn't take too much wood to make a nice caliper. Go to the next slide. This is a caliper that's taken apart. You kind of see it's different layers. It's different layers. The whole point of it is to get the jaws of the caliper to line up so you can get a good reading on a piece of wood. But I've got a lot of calipers, and the reason why is because I've made a lot of hollow turnings. Hollow turnings are really hard to to measure wall thickness, because they got a little hole in there. They can be kind of deep, and just one caliper like this one, it won't measure everything on a hollow turning. I've got some calipers that are just for around the lips. So the original caliper I made 30 years ago, I used a set of shears, and that's what the handles are. And then of course, I changed the measuring part to what I needed to get my wall thickness measured. So that's it for the calipers, I think.
Good.
No, there's another one. That's the other side. So if you, when we show back one, Sue, when we do the video and upload it to YouTube, if you really wanted to make something like this, you could use these two pictures and come up with a cutting drawing for your bandsaw. It wouldn't be too hard to figure it out.
Kevin, how about you draw it on a software, like AutoCAD, and 3D print it?
Yeah, I could do that. I'll have that for you in about 10 years. I could do it on graph paper a lot faster. In fact, if you wanted to come over, you could take these calipers and we could come up with a drawing that you could take right to a bandsaw, or we could put them on a piece of plywood.
Okay, I will show a caliper that I printed with 3D printing, and so this design is really nice. We can draw it and print for how many people would like to have it.
I think that's a great idea. I'll help you with that.
Cool.
All right. Next, please. Next. Okay. Now this is my. Okay. Go back one. Back. Okay. It's a standard 12-inch sanding disc. It's there's a belt, sanding belt, 6-inch by 48-inch sanding belt, and then it's 12-inch sanding disc. And you all know I make a lot of segmented stuff. And when I make a segmented ring, I'll make 2 half rings, and then I'll sand the butts so that the rings fit together perfectly. Well, the biggest sanding disc I have is 12-inch, so you'd think I could only make a 12-inch ring. Well, I was making some 18-inch rings, so I figured out a way to sand the butts. Okay, the next slide, please. And this setup, it's just basically a fence that extends the diameter of the sanding disc, and I can sand a 16 or 18-inch diameter ring. What I do is I put one side of the ring, one butt on the fence, and then I sand the butt that's against the disc sander. And another thing I do is I don't always turn the disc sander on. A lot of times I'll put my hand on the sanding belt, the belt that you see in the back of the photograph, and I'll just hand spin it, and that 20 or 30 RPM. And if there's not much to sand, that's can be sufficient to sand the butt to make a perfect ring. But there's a fence on either side of that 12-inch sanding disc, so I can sand either side of the half ring. Next photo, please. That shows that the fence is right in line with the sanding disc. I use a steel rule to exactly set it. Next slide, please.
That's convenient.
Okay. I wish that I had a 16-inch ring to show it to you, how it worked, but I use it on this kind of stuff too. I don't know why I just didn't sand the whole thing on my 12-inch disc, but I think it was a little bit too aggressive. So kind of shows you how I have one side on the fence, on the wooden fence, then the other side on the disc. It does a great job. Next slide, please. That's showing me sanding the other side of the ring. Okay, I'm done. Thank you. Any questions?
That's great.
Feel free to use the design.
Hey Mom, kann ich was anderes angucken? I'm missing most. I'm missing.
This is Phil Sykes.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
So, can you all hear me all right?
Yeah.
Who is this?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you well.
can hear
Okay,
you.
good. Hey, so a couple years ago, Mike Thomas
Good
showed his
evening.
frugal vacuum chuck. And I picked one up for my my smaller lathe when I was running that, and it worked super well. And then when I upgraded to my larger lathe, I needed to change a couple components on it to make it work. So what I'm showing you here is the Rotary Adapter.
Guck nur und fix ab an vielleicht, huh?
And somebody else talking there, sorry. So the Rotary Adapter goes in the end of the headstock there and connects to the pump. And then on the other hand, Anne was showing her chucks earlier. So the chuck is on the other side. So all this is just a piece of wood. And I drilled out a bolt that screws into the end of the lathe and glued it into the wood there. And I couldn't find like a hollow tube with the right threading on it. So I found there we go. Here's another picture. On the other side is two bearings. And I went with two bearings because a couple of designs I'd seen said that the two bearings help to with air loss a little bit better. So they're two sealed bearings. And then I just have a 1/2 inch outside diameter polypropylene tube that goes through that. And I think I put a little bit of glue in there just to seal it. So that end spins. And go ahead and go to the next picture, Sue. There's the whole thing. So that's the whole rotary adapter. And I think it cost me like $7 to make, as opposed to like buying one for $100 from One Way or something like that. But the amount of time I put into it, I probably just should have bought the One Way, but it was a fun little project to do. And trying to stay on the frugal side of things, it came out super handy. And surprisingly has better suction with this setup than I had with the old setup. So if you go to the next picture, see the last one.
I'm not sure that one made it.
Oh, that's all right. I was just showing the whole thing where if anybody was there like 3 years ago where Mike Thomas showed his pump and the whole setup and everything that he has, the polypropylene tube connects to that end, and then that goes on the back side of my headstock, and it's goes all so the air gets pulled through the headstock, of course, and pulling on the chuck on the other side. In the original frugal wood design, it had a polypropylene tube going all the way through the end, and you basically have the bearing system on each of the chucks. And I thought, well, if I can make one adapter like this, then I can make an infinite number of chucks, then I don't have to worry about the whole bearing situation on that. So that's worked really well. I actually have only made one chuck that I use it with right now, but I could make a whole bunch of them and just use the Beal tap to tap the chuck itself. So I just use a piece of maple wood to make the chuck itself. The other thing with this is, since it is maple in this case, the wood, I did put a couple coats of finish on it so that it helps to seal in the grain, so you don't have as much loss or air coming through the wood, which maple's pretty good about that. It's got a pretty tight grain, but just the extra finish around it there and some super glue in a couple particular spots help seal it up so there's no loss of air. But yeah, so that since I got my larger lathe last year, that's come in real handy because it means I can reuse a lot of the stuff that I had from my previous lathe for the vacuum setup.
That's great.
Thank you, Mike, for
hey, Phil,
did
you have Phil, quick question.
Yeah.
Did you have any trouble drilling out the bolt, the 1/2 inch bolt that goes into your spindle?
So that was probably the hardest thing to figure out because I went through the entire plumbing section looking for something that had the right thread on it, and there just wasn't anything there. So drilling out, it was threaded rod, so it's not hardened threaded rod. I think I just picked it up at Ace Hardware. So it's pretty soft, and I had a metal bit, a couple of them lying around. So it took a little bit of time, and I had to be patient with it to not go too fast and not overheat the bit. In fact, I might have even switched out the bit halfway. And then I use oil on the bit when I'm drilling out metal to help dissipate the heat and also just give it a little bit of lubricant, and that works really well. But I think this is like a zinc threaded rod or whatever it might be. It's pretty soft steel. So the bit that I used took care of it just fine. But it took a little while to go through all the way, because it's actually probably about 2.5 inches long. I think there's about 1 inch or so sunk into the wood there, plus the bolt, plus the actual thread that goes into the machine. Yeah, and then the other thing with that too is the hole is definitely not centered, because it was definitely wandering around a bit. But if you ever do something like this, I'd recommend drilling out the bolt or whatever you do first, and then attach that to the body next, and then turn the rest of the body, because the bolt's not quite centered in the hole there. So as it's spinning, it kind of jiggles a little bit, and my hose just kind of jiggles around. So on the next version I do, I'll figure that one out. But it works really well. I was pretty pleased with it.
That's really resourceful.
Thanks for sharing, Phil.
Sure thing.
Okay, this is Phil Royer.
I've played around with wood threading for a couple of years, and one of the things that's held me back has been the cost of the boxwood or the African blackwood. And I played around with trying to thread maple or cherry, and in the normal orientation of threading, you're trying to thread the side grain, and the maple and the cherry wouldn't hold the threads. And somewhere I heard about somebody like inserting segments of a segment they had glued together to where you were trying to thread side grain, you know, the long grain. And I've got a walnut box here, and then I'd made a segment out of cherry, just like you make the segments for the segmented bowls or urns, and then cut it and insert it into the piece of walnut. And I was able to thread the cherry with no problem, because you're doing it the long grain all the way around as opposed to side grain. And I've had real good luck with cherry and maple and some Swiss pearwood, different woods that normally wouldn't thread, but because I've changed the orientation of them by doing the segmented inserts, I've been able to thread it and then make my box out of, you know, anything I want, walnut, cherry, anything else, and then I don't have to turn up the expensive exotic woods to be able to do the thread chasing. It also gives me I can make my segments larger than I would be able to find pieces of boxwood. So if I wanted to do 2 and 3 and 4 inch threads, I would be able to do that, when the normal woods that will thread on their own, as you normally do the thread chasing, would be too expensive to do in that size. I don't know whether you can see on my picture. Here's one of the segments I had glued together using the wedgie sled, and would be able then to insert it into a piece of common wood.
So Phil, your segment there was eight pieces. Is that what you find works best for you?
6, 8 pieces. I mean, if you wanted to do 23 pieces or something, that would work also. But if you do like 8, you're getting a long enough piece of the long grain in there that when you chase the threads, it just comes off like ribbons. Whereas you normally chase threads, even in good wood, you'll only get, you know, little short threads of the wood coming off. But it's just like when you're turning a segmented bowl. When you turn those, you get just ropes coming off the wood as you turn it, and the same thing happens when you're chasing the threads.
Good.
Now on this one here, you get a little bit, you can sort of see the joint. I'm probably not as good as putting the segments together as Kevin is, but this is magnified quite a bit. This is like 1.5 inches in diameter, so normally that wouldn't be an issue.
You might use some different glue. Use a thick and quick glue. It's clear, and you'll see less of a joint.
Yeah. And if I would use the cherry or something else, a little darker wood might help. But I think I probably started doing this before I knew about the thick and quick glue.
Yeah, it really does a good job on light wood. On the dark wood, it doesn't matter. Light wood like this, it will be more invisible.
Yeah.
Shameless sponsor plug. The glue's on sale for $3 this month at Woodcraft.
Okay, well, yeah, I saw that. I might have to give that a shot.
Good.
That's all I've got in North.
Thanks, Phil. Nice tip.
Okay. This is Phil Sykes again. Oh, this is the missing picture from before that got.
There you go. So now you can actually see the pump there on the left-hand side and all the gauges and everything. And then that just hooks up. So the way the Frugal kit is, it uses I think it's a 3/8 polypropylene tube that goes into the 1/2-inch tube. And so then it hooks up to the adapter and then straight through the headstock to the chuck.
And this is Brick Bywater. Are you on mute, Work?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You can go ahead and run this video if it's possible.
I'm not sure this.
Click on play on the left side.
This is a joint project that Effie and I tackled. I discovered, like Phil, that when you use the wedgie sled and you do a segment of 6 sides, it's much easier to do threading. And so I make a lot of bolt heads and nuts, and I use my Vicmark soft jaws, but I've never ever seen a Vicmark soft jaw hexagon. And so Effie was kind enough to say, let's tackle it. And Effie, I think, didn't you draw this up on?
Works wonderful.
Aspire.
And we spent a couple days down at the CNC machine and took a raw piece of that white stuff and made, it was 1 3/4 inch thick. And I wanted at least holding power of about 3/4 inch. And so that's how it turned out. It allows me to actually do the threading now and flip the bolt around and hit the high sides like a regular nut would have. And it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful.
Are you going to sell those?
I don't know. We would have to probably really streamline our manufacturing process, wouldn't you say, Effie?
Yeah.
But it's a one of a kind. I don't think anybody else has one like that, or I've never seen one. And the nice thing about it is, when you open up your normal jaws, a lot of times if it's round, it goes out of round. Have you noticed that? Well,
yeah.
This locks in perfectly. So as I expand those jaws, I can do a much bigger hexagon if I want to. So it was a fun needed project for me.
That's cool.
Okay, now hit the.
Hi, it's Rick again. A couple years ago, I was in the process of building my own steady rest, and Mark Inman, who's on our board, gave me 6 wheels to try, and they just didn't work right because they were flat. And so I gave him back 4, and I hung on to 2. Just, you never have enough wheels. But basically, I came up with a real nice design for a vacuum chuck. You can never have enough vacuum chucks. I probably have 6 or 7. Here, I've actually had to sacrifice a real expensive faceplate on this vacuum chuck. You know, this is a homemade version, same kind of process. This was my smallest vacuum chuck to date, and it works fairly well. This particular design didn't cost me a dime because of the free wheel and free wood. I'll demonstrate. I used the Beal system to thread the M33 onto my one-way, and then we'll get the vacuum going. Voila.
That's cool.
So there's the wheel, and what's neat about these wheels is you've got a deep side, which is what the ball sets in, and then this shallow side that is shown here in the picture. So basically what you have to do is, for this particular wheel, I actually had to turn that aluminum away, and then I was able to then do a jam fit epoxy with my piece of wood. Now this prototype, I think I use ash, which I would not recommend using ash. I would rather recommend using hard maple, cherry, probably Bradford pear would be a very good piece as well. With those three types of woods, this is a great little vacuum chuck for turning small spheres, doing a lot of sanding on there and so forth. And there again, if you need a wheel, I think Mark's got maybe a few left.
Okay.
Thanks for the tip, Rick.
Now this is Rick Tucker.
Yeah, when I made my first segmented bowl, I didn't have some big screw clamps, and I didn't want to take a bunch of little small ones and put them together. So I made this tool. I saw it before. It's just a piece of 1/4 inch rope. I took a piece of oak, drilled a 3/8 hole through it, and put a little groove on one end of it. And what you do is you tie a knot, you turn the screwdriver to twist the rope, and it pulls your segments all together and makes a nice little clamp. That's my tip.
Well, that's good. It's like a
Very nice.
This is Stuart Schenker.
Hi there. The times that I needed my lathe for finishing were always interrupted by needing to use the lathe for something other than finishing, like a new project. So I decided I needed another lathe. But I didn't really want to have another lathe because I didn't have any room. So what I made was a finishing box, actually 2 of them. This one holds things like a bowl upward, and in the bottom of the large box on the left is a motor that unfortunately ran too fast, so I had to make a new extension for it. And then I was able to turn the knob on the top and just took the black part from my old lawnmower. This was really scrapped together, as you can see with other scrapped wood. Plug it in and it goes at about 20 RPM. So when you're spraying lacquer on it, it doesn't fly off at you and the bowl stays in the correct position. And in the meantime, I put on pencil marks on the top to be able to center the bowl or whatever piece I was going to use it on. And it allowed me to be able to have a project on the lathe and have this in either another room or in a different part of the shop to be able to finish it and not have drips and runs because it was in continuous motion. The next one is the same thing in a vertical position was the first one. This is a horizontal one. And as you can see, a bowl goes on the end. If you go to the next one, this is built more or less like a wooden lathe with a motor on the back on the left. Same setup. Once again, you can thread on a piece that's round onto your headstock, which is basically just a 18 RPM motor. And then the length of the entire piece, if you go to the next one, shows you how you can clamp it in position, spray as you need to while it's going around and around. And you can use this for hollow forms, or you can use it for bowls, or really whatever you need. But it once again frees up the lathe. And all of this was made with scrap, as you can see. So it's certainly not at this point anything that anyone would have any problem doing. It's very easy to just go out into your wood pile and see what you have, put together these things, and buy a motor.
Where'd you find the motor?
I got it at they're Dayton Motors, a place on I think it's 99th and out in Lenexa.
Granger's.
I'm sorry?
Granger's.
Granger's, that's right. So the motor was the most expensive part. I think that was probably $35 or $40. But you can, once again, this is an 18 RPM. You want to have the bowls or the item circulating somewhere between 20 and 30, because if it goes too fast, obviously in the horizontal, they'll fly right off. On this, if you go too fast, just like on your lathe, when you spray it, some of it comes back and hits you. So this goes at 18 to 20 is just fine. And you can walk out of the room, and 20 minutes later, when it's dried from the lacquer, you can have already been using your regular lathe for doing whatever you wanted to do. This is dried, and you can put on the next layer, or you can switch it around and put it over, turn it over, do whatever you need. But you've got two available places to finish without having tied up your lathe, which is what I was doing.
Sure. Is that an AC or a DC motor?
An AC. The cord is underneath the bowl, and it's just, once again, it was a scrap piece of cord that was off of like an old lamp, and I just wired it in with the blue tips on the end, and I put a well, the lamp had its own on-off switch on it, one of those roller switches. So turn it on, turn it off, leave it plugged in if you want, you don't have to. But right now, this just sort of, when I'm not using it, it sits out of the way. And when I do use it, it's, once again, out of the way. So it frees me up for other things.
I need to make one of those.
That's what I said.
No, I've been looking for a, a small MIDI lathe, used one, cheap, that I'm going to use just for that purpose. But this is a better.
This just, the only new part to the whole thing was the motor, which once again is available at Granger's. I can get you the model number. But once again, it's a Dayton motor, and I probably have the box for it out in the shop, but it's easy to make. The whole thing is about 3.5 feet long, maybe. And that was only because I wanted to see if I could use it for hollow forms that were up to 12 inches deep, and it does work.
Mm-hmm. That's a great thing.
Thanks for sharing that, Stuart. That's very cool.
Well, the other one, the first one that was shown also works equally well. So it's just a matter of, you can make the discs any size you want to put your pieces onto. So if you have a larger bowl and you want to do a, 20-inch piece, it'll roll it.
Mhm.
That's all I have.
Thanks for sharing.
Okay, that's the last of our pictures here. I need 5 minutes to pull in the last two challenges and a show and tell. Effie had sent me a link to a site where he had some tips and tricks he wanted to talk about. And I suggested he share his own screen rather than trying to pull things down.
Yeah, I can share it quickly.
Let me stop share on mine.
And Sue, that should give you a second or two to get your stuff going, right?
Yes.
Good. You guys work so well together. Good job.
So why is it not shit? Okay. I'm fascinated by 3D printing and CNC, and I made few things with the 3D printing. That's a center finder. This is I have a Novichok, and two different, so I can have a gauge
Size.
to see whether it's the foot is too small or too big. I made a caliper, and we can enhance Kevin's caliper to do that. And I also printed kind of soft jaws. And this is from a website called Thingiverse. They have a section for woodturners. That's it. It's really cool.
So do you have a 3D printer, Effie?
No, I use the printer at the Olathe Library.
Okay.
Do you pay for filament then when you do that?
It's for free, and it's not very busy. Anyone can go and print there as long as you have a Johnson County library card, and people there are very nice. It's really a cool place. They have a small CNC. They have 2 laser engravers, big ones. And they have all kind of vinyl cutter, sewing machine, audio studio, all kind of cool stuff.
Okay. I know you've mentioned that for years, that I need to go into that makerspace, and I've wanted to. So one of these days I'll get there and check it out.
So we already have a Woodturners meeting there. Rick Bywater, Jack, Sean, and I have been there.
Oh, great.
Effie, question about your soft jaws. Does that material, I mean, is that stout enough to be able to really chuck something up in those soft jaws and hold it?
So it's plastic and it's not solid. It's the filament it's not very filled. So, and you can adjust how solid you want it to have. So it's not very strong. Not as strong as the acrylic that Rick Bywater shows.
Okay. Good.
Sue, how are you doing on that?
So Mike, you can draw any jaws that you can imagine.
Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't know that you could change the density of that material by how much, like what air is in it.
Yeah. So I think that the default is about 15% filament. So you can make it 100% as well.
Okay. Now,
Effie,
how long did it
take?
Yeah.
How long did it take to print those jaws?
I think 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, I know it's pretty slow.
Yes, yes. I
Well, those are
printed,
pretty tall jaws too.
yeah,
That would probably take longer the more dense you make it too, right?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So this thing took, I printed that thing. It took, I think, 6 or 7 hours.
Okay.
Effie, what's the website again?
Thingiverse, I will put it in the chat here.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Sue, how are we doing? Oh, you're still muted.
I was afraid I'd have to yell at the cats. But they've stopped growling now, so we can hopefully find my way to the screen.